Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, more specifically the Nintendo 64 core. Because if for some reason you missed my videos last week, both Conker's Bad Fur Day as well as Jet Force Gemini now 100% work on the core with some game patches. I'm going to go over today why they work now, how to patch those games out, the few games that still don't work, and just give you guys a general overview of how to start enjoying both Conker's Bad Fur Day as well as Jet Force Gemini on your MiSTer FPGA, because they are two of the heaviest hitting games on the console and they're now here available for everyone. Now I did a metric crap ton of research in a video series on Conker's Bad Fur Day when I was looking at this, and then Ruleset ended up making a patch. What I found when I was going through all of the different testing is there was a memory overflow issue, which was basically trying to read or write from memory sectors that were already occupied by something. It seemed like the memory allocation just did not work, like it was hung over and didn't know how to operate, pun very much intended. The great part is Conker's Bad Fur Day works today. We've all finished the game on Discord. I've tested it myself, seen the credits scroll. You will be good to go. As far as Jet Force Gemini is concerned, it is another patch, and it basically just removes a single check on the RSP or reality signal processor at the beginning of the game. Once this has happened, the game plays perfectly fine, and I've talked to a few people who tested this for me in the background. They completed the game. They've seen the credits scroll as well. So these two games have been added to the playable list on MiSTer FPGA with no issues reported by anyone whatsoever. And that is absolutely awesome. Getting these two titles working on the core just leaves like 3 games right now that can exhibit freezing issues, and 1 game that just really isn't going to be playable, but we'll definitely look at in the future. But this again is just so much fun to see the community come together. Robert FPGA Zoomspas made such an incredible core, and now people are coming from behind and finishing up on a few different patches. Now, the Conker's patch is definitely the more interesting of the two in my opinion, because it's basically just wrapping around to the additional 4 megabytes of RAM on the expansion pack, even though the game never used the expansion pack in the first place. What it's doing is kicking some of the data into that secondary 4 megabytes of RAM, and when it overflows, just basically wrapping back around. This may result in a tiny hitch every few hours in the game, but honestly, with the way this game runs on Nintendo 64 hardware, it feels like it hitches every minute or so. You will absolutely never notice this is happening. And through all of my testing on Conker's Bad Fur Day on the patch, I was able to complete the game again with 0 freezing whatsoever. It just 100% felt like the game that I know, love, and remember. And just to give you guys a visual example of what you're patching before I get to the patch tutorial, if you could crash the core, you would see here in green where it was trying to write from, and you'll see that there really isn't any contiguous block of memory there. So it seemed like this memory overflow issue was definitely what was stopping everything working, and that was a bummer because this is such an iconic Nintendo 64 game. And like I said, on the Jet Force Gemini side, it was a hilarious fix. There was a patch previous for flash carts that would allow this game to boot, but apparently the timing on that was not 100% correct with the core. Remove that check out and the game 100% just plays. So if you've never patched a game before, I'm going to show you everything you're going to need to do to be able to play these both on your MiSTer. If you're not on MiSTer Discord yet, you definitely should be. You're going to want to go down to the Nintendo 64 channel, and I will leave a link to a forum, the MiSTer FPGA forums as well, where these files are in case you're not on Discord. But I always recommend you come over here first, because these patches can and will change, so you'll get the most current patches. And I'm just leaving a fun message, because if I'm going to capture where I talk to people all day long, I figured I'd just give them a heads up to see if they said anything funny, and everyone let me down. They responded after I actually wrote the text. But all jokes aside, I couldn't help myself there. If you go to the top of the screen, you're going to see the push pin icon, or pins. If you go ahead and click that, it's going to pull up all of the pins for the Nintendo 64 channel. And at the top, you're going to have both the patch for Jet Force Gemini as well as Conker's Bad Fur Day, and a small description as to what these patches are actually doing. You're going to want to download both of these. They are going to be necessary for you to play these games on your MiSTer FPGA. So go ahead and download both of those files, and do note that they're .bps patches. That's going to have a checksum check in it to make sure that the files you're trying to apply the patches to are the correct ones. That way you will succeed 10 out of 10 times when you patch these things up. And if you are curious a little bit more about the description, definitely read that as well. And if you're not chatting in MiSTer FPGA Discord yet, you definitely should be. Now you'll see here we have the 4 files needed to make these games run on MiSTer FPGA. The 2 BPS patches and the North American version of both Jet Force Gemini Gemini as well as Conker's Bad Fur Day. You can technically use the uncensored patched ROM if you have that first, but I'm doing this just with the retail games. So definitely make sure you have the North American versions. At this point in time, there aren't patches for the other languages. Those may come in the future, but right now it's an English-speaking audience for these overall benefits. Now online, there is an online web patcher for BPS files along with IPS and so many others. This is a general modding tutorial right here as far as patching is concerned, but we're using the Nintendo 64 core to show it to you. You're going to see that there is a choose file for the ROM and choose file for the patch. Go ahead and pick either of the two games. If you want both, we'll do this twice. If you only want once, we'll do it once. And go ahead and double click on that. You'll see that the ROM is now applied in there, and don't forget you should own the game when you're doing this. Now we're going to go ahead and select the Conker's Bad Fur Day for Nintendo 64 core patch. Double click that and you'll see it's going to save in your download directory as the following file name. The file name does not matter whatsoever. You can really call it whatever you want, and make sure that you do not deselect skip checksums. That is going to be important, because if you try to apply the wrong patch to the wrong file and you hit patch, up at the top you're going to get the following warning. If you see this, check your files again. Error source checksum mismatch. Patch is not meant for this ROM. And that is why it's a BPS patch. It checks these things to make sure you will succeed. And we'll do the exact same thing for JetForce Gemini again. Go ahead and select the two files, hit patch, and you will be good to go. And now that I've moved these files from my download folder to this example folder, you're going to see that we have the original ROMs as well as the two patch ROMs in that .z64 format. You need to use the .z64 format for these patches, so now we can just drag these files into our MiSTer FPGA Nintendo 64 folder under games and go ahead and launch them like any other game on this system. And this is what's getting JetForce Gemini and Conker's Bad Fur Day to run on the core. In the instance of JetForce Gemini, it just removes that one check, and it is very amusing for all of the security that Rare put into this game. And that single RSP check at the beginning was what was holding it up from actually being playable. It's expecting a response in a certain set period of time, and it just wasn't getting that. So now today it is on that patch. So RuleSet absolutely nailed this one. I was going to do some research on it after the 4th of July, and I didn't even get there. As of course, Conker's Bad Fur Day is playing as well, and this is just a reallocation of the memory mapping to keep it from doing that memory overrun. And in a little bit, I'm going to go over the few games that still show a little bit of freezing in the core and ask you guys which game you want me to research first, because I am definitely going to take a look at one more Nintendo 64 game to see if I can figure out why it's freezing, so maybe in the future we can play that 100% on the core as well. But honestly, with July 4th coming up, that's one hell of an explosion. Remember again, fireworks are dangerous, don't end up like this rat. Now, as far as Resident Evil 2 is concerned, I have completed both Leon's campaign and Claire's campaign without freezing the game whatsoever, but other people have had some limited instances of Claire's campaign freezing on them with the North American NTSC version of the game. Apparently PAL is freezing a lot less, so that is a difference, and it could be one that is researched. But right now, if you're playing Resident Evil 2 on the core, there seems to be a rare instance of it crashing, so if you want me to research this one, leave me a comment down below. This is the one I don't want to research though, because it seems to be exceedingly difficult to trigger the crash and a little bit random. It seems like I see it less, and that may be my ability to just run by enemies and kind of pretend the game is just a walking simulator. The second game that's going to see relatively consistent crashing is Battle for Naboo. This is another one that I can definitely research in a video series, so lodge your votes down below. But these two games right here, I would definitely say Resident Evil 2 is playable. If it does crash, reload your save and you should be able to get by that instance relatively easily, so it is a game you can see the credits on, versus something like Battle for Naboo. On the North American version of the game, you're just not going to be able to finish the game no matter what you do. Why is it crashing? Nobody has any idea yet. I'm not sure if there's a bug handler or some sort of other debug option to get that crash data out, and that's definitely useful when you are researching those things. So if you know of one of those, tell me down below in the comments. The other game that still randomly crashes is Polaris Snowcross, and I have absolutely no interest in looking into this one whatsoever. It is just not the type of game that I'm that interested in, and if it's the only game on the Nintendo 64 core that ends up being anything less than perfect, honestly for me, it is one of those things we can kind of leave it behind until one day there's a MiSTer 2, where some of these issues can be resolved just because the Nintendo 64 core is pushing the MiSTer FPGA to its absolute limit as far as its capabilities are concerned. So if your favorite game is Player Snowcross, sorry, it still does have a little bit of freezing, but that's just kind of how it's going to be. But that's the situation with Conker's Bad Fur Day and Jet Force Gemini. They both now work 100% on the core. You can play them from start to finish and see the credits scroll, and I've now taught you how to patch both of these games if you needed that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, but I'm getting close to doing some MiSTer FPGA to real hardware comparisons, so if you have any games you want to see tested, tell me down below as well. But short of that, we're done. Go play those games, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.